We go for launch.
5.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
4.
My friend, we cannot keep this a secret any longer.
This whole thing is insane.
3.
Quiet, please. I am analyzing.
Where's the kaboom?
2.
There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
1.
You're a man of many talents.
The Ark. It is something that man was not meant to disturb.
An army which carries the Ark before it is invincible.
Indiana
Jones! Let her go.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'm going after that truck.
Oh, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. Trust me.
In 213 BC,
Archimedes sculpted a dial
that could change the course of history.
With this, we will have our victory.
It's not yours. You stole it.
Then you stole it.
And then I stole it.
Get back. We gotta get there first.
I can't do that!
You want to stop for a little lie down? Hell no!
Turn left! Turn left! Indy, listen to me, no!
I ain't no Ken's here.
Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Rated PG-13.
Greetings, my fellow galactic travelers, and welcome back to Planet 8. This is your mission commander Larry speaking to you from our hidden base. Chief Engineer Bob is here by my side as always in the command center, and circling Planet 8 in our orbital spy satellite is Reconnaissance Officer Karen. Welcome back. On this episode of Planet 8, your intrepid crew is going to take a deep dive discussing the Indiana Jones films. Straight away, let's kick it up to the satellite. Karen, why don't you ease us into this discussion? Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. So Indiana Jones. So now we got 5 movies. Some people might not want to admit we have 5 movies, but we do have 5 movies in the Indiana Jones series. And we'll be talking
all of them in the last about week and a half.
Yeah, I know. I've done that, drinking the Kool-Aid real quick. And we'll be talking very specifically, giving our review of the new Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I do think they could have given it a better title, but even so, we'll be talking about it in some detail later on. But right up first, we'll be just kind of given some ideas about it. And I remember when this first came out, when Raiders, and it was Raiders of the Lost Ark. Right. There was no, just like this crap about Star Wars and New Hope, it was no New Hope, and it was no Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was just Raiders of the Lost Ark. I remember when it came out, I was like, what the heck is this? And I almost didn't go see it because it just was like, what? And Harrison Ford cut his hair. Back then, that was a big thing. It was like, what? He cut his hair. It looks weird. Everybody said, no, you should go see it. It's really amazing, all these stunts and all this stuff. And I said, okay. And yeah, it was really impressive, right? It moved along at a fast clip. It was like the old serials, that was the intent, right? To take the old serials from the 1930s, but do it in a modern way and do a nice homage, but do it with the great filmmaking techniques that we have today. So Lucas had the original idea. Lucas, I mean, he has all the ideas, but he doesn't always maybe implement them great. But then he knew Spielberg, and Spielberg, being an excellent director, was able to kind of bring a lot of that to life. And yeah, just general impressions, I think, of that film. I mean, that film is like a perfect movie. What would you cut out of that movie, or what would you change? Nothing. It's just like an A+ film from beginning to end. And yeah, I have no criticisms of that. And that's the problem with it, right? Is Raiders is so good. Every sequel that comes after is measured against it. And how can you compete with that film?
Agreed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I said, I binged my way through in the last week and a half. I hadn't watched any of these movies probably in 10 years. I mean, it's been a while. And I forgot how fun, really, I mean, they're all fun in their own way. But I forgot how much fun. And one thing I noticed that I never noticed before when I was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark on my nice big HD TV is there's one scene where Indy comes up on the mountainside with the rocket launcher on his shoulder, and Belloc is down in the ravine, and he looks up and he has this big speech for Indiana Jones. And if you watch, when they have a close-up of him, if you watch very closely, a fly lands on his chin. And as he's talking, it slowly crawls up and goes in his mouth.
Yes.
And he doesn't miss a beat, and he doesn't, and there's no edit where he like, spit it out or anything. He just keeps going. And that fly, and it's like, I saw it and I go, and Debbie was watching with me. I'm like, did you see that? And she's like, what? I go, look. And I like scan back. Look, there's a fly on his chin. Watch, it's going to go in and it goes in his mouth. It's like, oh my God. So yeah, it was kind of reminded me of Crystal Skull in the end, when the one guy falls into the pile of the big, red ants, and they're all covering him up and they all go crawling in his mouth and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This was like not an effect. This was like a real fly on his chin that really went in his mouth. And it's like, yikes.
Well, it was funny because I was reading some making of stuff, and the actor said he was like so into it, he did not feel or realize anything was going on. But Spielberg was like, yeah, I just saw it go right in his mouth. He's like, I'm pretty sure he ate that fly and he had no idea he was eating it. He was so into the scene. But yeah, that is weird when you watch it. And then you like do a double take, like, did that just go in there? And yep,
right.
Sure did.
It's fun to look back, and we have to give credit to John Williams, of course, for the music to Raiders of the Lost Ark, and throughout almost all of the films. I mean, they've used the cues throughout. But this movie came out in what, 1980, 1981?
81.
81. So Star Wars was 77. Empire was 1980, right? Or did Empire come out in 82? 80. So
80.
Harrison Ford, what was the Mosquito Coast? He tried to do like a serious film. There was some other movies that he had yet filmed Return of the Jedi and stuff. Tom Selleck at one point in time was going to get the role.
Right.
He was locked into Magnum PI, and they wouldn't let him go.
Well, Lucas was afraid that he was going to get connected to Harrison Ford. He said the same way that Scorsese was connected to Robert De Niro. He was like, he didn't want to be like, oh, I've got my guy that I put into everything. But, Harrison Ford is perfect for that role.
Absolutely.
You got a good guy, just stick with him.
Yeah.
Like Akira Kurosawa and Toshiro Mifune.
Mm-hmm.
But you can pick any director, actor, but yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, if Tom Selleck got that role, do you think we'd really have 5 movies?
No, we'd have Quigley Down Under.
Or One and Done, right? We'd have Romancing the Stone too.
Yeah, it's again, like all the pieces came into place perfectly on this film, right? Or like the other thing, you've got so many great actors in this. Sulla, who's played by Jonathan Rhys-Davies, right? Such a great actor. Love him in so many different movies. Originally, they envisioned that character very differently as a very small man, and they were going to offer it to Danny DeVito. But he was locked into Taxi, and somehow, it came back.
Thank God for some of these TV shows.
Right. And because Sulla is like one of the he doesn't appear in Temple of Doom, but he's like in everything else. And he's such a great character. Indy, my friend. So
he reminds me of, and I'll bet you there's a little influence in there. Was Pasha Peddler from Johnny Quest. And he was the one that was, he was like Haji's buddy. And he was almost the exact same character.
Interesting.
Singing and everything else. He was.
And they may have both taken that from some of these 1940s movies, Casablanca and all these other films, right? They may have both pulled from the same source. But so many things like fell into place because they couldn't get the actors they wanted in the first place, but they got so much better. I mean, Danny DeVito might have been good too, but
destiny. It was all destiny.
It really seems like it was,
Karen Allen was another great choice. And I mean, I can't imagine the movie without her. Such a gritty, just beautiful, actor, spot on the comedy, the action, the adventure. Just a great, great cast. Can't say enough good things. And like you said, Walker, it's a perfect movie. And where do you go from there? Well, you go to the Temple of Doom.
Well, that was the one I hadn't seen probably the longest. It might be in a tie with Crystal Skull. But it was a much better film than I remembered. I think that it gets a lot of flack because it's the dark entry in the Indiana Jones films. It really goes into a dark place. You've got, the pulling the heart out of the chest, the children enslaved, all this kind of stuff, which I think a lot of people after the first film, they weren't expecting that, and they're kind of like taken aback. And I think that whole thing threw a lot of people off.
Well, it was set to get a rated R, a R rating, right? And
think about it.
What's that?
It was done before. I mean, look at Star Wars and Empire.
Yeah, and they say that's what Lucas was going for. He kind of wanted the second one to be darker, and because they were planning
way overboard, though. I mean, in my opinion, I was like, and the thing is, it started so lighthearted at the Club Obi-Wan and the dun 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 dun, the little dance number, and the little comedy of the poison and the antidote, and hold on to your potatoes, Dr. Jones, and I don't know, and then we're eating chilled monkey brains. And
well, I mean, it did, to Bob's point, it created the PG-13 because they
right
it clearly it wasn't the PG, but they didn't want the hard R, so they
even Short Round lightened it up. And I'll tell you, man, that kid's going to win an Oscar someday, I'm telling you.
But I think between that and then I think Kate Capshaw's character of Willie was a little bit grating for some people. I think it's an entry in the series that not everybody's going to enjoy. There's certain elements, but then there's also a lot of really cool stuff, because if you just go with the darkness, Indy's on this quest. He's got to go up against some really evil dudes. You got the mine train chase, which was fun and was something that was supposed to be in Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
It was a set piece designed for Raiders when they were out in the desert digging up sites. They were going to do this mine train chase, and they're like, we can't fit this in. So they fit it into Temple of Doom. So there's a lot of cool stuff in there if you go back and watch it. But, I think you have to be in the right mood to go watch it.
Oh, for sure. It's not a bad movie. It's not the original, and I think going into it, I was thinking, oh, Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't. And I think it's aged well. I enjoyed it a lot more prepping for the podcast than I remember back when it first came out. Yeah, it was interesting. One of the things too is Indy got his sword fight. The sword fight was going to be in Raiders of the Lost Ark. Harrison Ford had some stomach issues and wasn't going to fight and it's a great scene in Raiders where the guy's like, and he just pulls out the gun and he saves the kids. He gets the girl. I mean, isn't that,
Mm-hmm.
It was just unfortunate that Karen Allen wasn't in this, Marion Sala, certainly I missed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an okay film, and it has the distinction of getting the first PG-13 rating and created that whole system for movies that weren't quite PG but weren't quite R.
Yeah, so I hadn't seen it since it came out in theater, and it's like I would read online, oh, Temple of Doom, it sucks. It's like the worst, and so bad. And so when I watched it as part of my binge for this episode, I thought, that's really not that bad. It is what it is. I guess, I don't know, maybe people were so shocked that it wasn't Indiana Jones, but
I think after, we have the benefit of having gone through the Crystal Skull, and so we can say, oh, it's not that bad.
Well, even Crystal Skull, which I literally finished watching like 5 minutes before we record here today, wasn't that bad. I mean, it was okay. I mean,
yeah,
that happens more often than we care to admit, too.
Luckily, I had the day off today.
You guys are lucky.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the film, and I think it has aged well. What was a lot of and there were no Nazis in this film.
Nazi free.
Yeah, it was Nazi free.
Well, it was set before Raiders too. That's another thing.
I was going to say it was set before Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was kind of interesting. Any last minute thoughts on this? Otherwise, we're going to transition into Crusade.
No, I think,
Okay.
It is what it is, and it was what it was, and
enjoy it with some chilled monkey brains. Okay, so Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. What could have been more fun than having Short Round bringing Indiana Jones's father into the picture? There's a beautiful scene, and I just, Sala's like, Indy, Indiana's the name of the dog. Oh, he got the biggest laugh.
A lot of good memories about that dog. Junior. It's like every movie, he's got like a different, like in the first one, he's Indy. The second one, he's Dr. Jones.
Yeah.
Short Round's like, Dr. Jones. And this one, he's Junior. So,
Junior. Not to break the podcast, but there's this movie called Gargoyles. It was made for TV.
Oh, it's such a great movie.
I did that. And a friend watched it recently, and I'm like, oh, I can't watch that movie because afterwards for days I'm always saying Diana, because it's the way that the gargoyle pronounces. But anyway, Sean Connery saying Junior. I'll be doing that for days now. What a wonderful, I thought, and the Last Crusade, it was going to be the last, Indiana Jones movie. They did these things like Star Wars and Star Trek every 3 or 4 years. You'd have, the next film come out, and they were usually trilogies. On occasion you'd get like a fourth film or something like that. I enjoyed this, not as much as the first one, but I enjoyed it. You always have solid villains with Nazis, and there were Nazis galore in this one. There was a young Indiana Jones in the beginning of the film, and you kind of learn how he got his scratch on his cheek and his fear of snakes, and the use of a whip. And it was played by River Phoenix, who unfortunately passed away after the filming of Last Crusade. But just a solid, fun popcorn movie for me. Sean Connery just did such a great job, and Sala came back, and it was just fun for me. I really enjoy Last Crusade. What say you all?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think most people. I was a little bit surprised in reading people's thoughts that some people put Last Crusade ahead of Raiders. Now I would not go that
put
far.
It like just behind, close, but
yeah. I mean, it's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy it, and Sean Connery, everything you brought up, Larry, I agree with 100%. And I think it's they thank God they went with the concept they went with. It's interesting to kind of read about like the evolution of these things, and like Lucas always seems to he'll come up with these ideas for more like the MacGuffin, and then Spielberg kind of comes up with more of the touchy-feely stuff. And I guess originally Lucas was like, well, I want to have a haunted castle, like a Scottish haunted castle, and Spielberg was like, I just did Poltergeist, man. I don't want to do that. So then Lucas was like, what about the Holy Grail? And he's like, I don't know. And then Spielberg was like, well, I want to do like a father-son thing. What if we found Indiana's father? And so then, the synthesis of these ideas comes together, and we get this really rich motion picture. And again, like the casting, right? They were like, well, who, the only person who could be Indiana Jones's father is James Bond. It's like, it just makes sense. And Connery was delighted to do it. And he pulls it off. He's got like such a twinkle in his eye the whole time that he's doing it.
Well, I mean, the thing I'll say about Connery, especially in this movie, is whenever you see Sean Connery in a movie, he always plays Sean Connery. It's pretty much, that's it. But in this movie, he wasn't Sean Connery. He actually was a different character playing Indiana Jones' father. He could have played it off as Sean Connery. But yes, he still had the accent, whatever. But I thought he did a great job. And I thought, that was some of his best acting right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's such a charming, father, to Indiana Jones. And, there's a part in the movie with River Phoenix, and he's like, calm down, count backwards in Greek or whatever. And he's like, okay. Yeah. And I think this was 1989.
Yes.
1990. Sorry, 89. Okay. All right. So like I said, you had 2, 3, 4 years, and then, the sequel. And so this was going to be the last hurrah. And one of the things that I think was so clever with the Indiana Jones films was there was adventure and always just a little bit of like comedy. And it's not like Three Stooge comedy, which I love the Stooges, but it was just that like, haha, kind of, at one point in time, the young woman in this film was like, oh, Dr. Jones, and they're both like, yes. It's like, oh, wait a minute, Dad, what's going on?
Well, one of the best lines was when, they had been captured, and, India's like saying, well, she's she's a Nazi. And he goes, oh, I know she's a Nazi. And he was like, well, how do you know? And he's like, well, she talks in her sleep. And and yeah, that was improvised by Connery on the set, and it like floored everybody. And Spielberg's like, we're going to keep that one, and just
because they have the other line too, where she's talking about, having sex or whatever, and just saying, that was the best night of my life. And Connery's like, oh, thank you, and then they kind of both look at him. And, oh.
Yeah, they do a nice job of mixing in humor with the action. And the other thing is, and sort of this gets to, I guess, maybe some people's complaints about the new film and even like Crystal Skull, but I think they mix just a little fantasy in each movie, right? It's like, it's an action adventure film with a little bit of magic or a little bit of fantasy, just enough that it's like you don't become maybe overwhelmed. But he does go into a tomb and find the Holy Grail, and it does have some ability to like heal people, or he chose badly,
wisely.
Yeah. Right, yeah, it's like, so just enough, so it doesn't overwhelm.
Because it's like I see movies, whether it's this or Excalibur or whatever, where the Holy Grail is like a main part of the film, and it's hard for me because I always go back to Monty Python. So I cannot take a story about a grail seriously ever, but that's just me.
I use this I have used this line in my life to just, not obsess and not, there are points in your life when you have to let it go, boy. Let it go.
No.
And it to me, it was like, his father, his entire life was dedicated to the Grail, and Indy's about to like fall in, and I can get it, Dad. Henry, or
the first time he calls him Indiana,
let it go, boy.
Right.
Let it go. And I'm like, oh. So I'll be trying to get that Comic-Con special edition. It's $500. Let it go, boy. Let it go.
But that was the beauty of it, right? It was like the artifacts and all that stuff, they don't really matter. What matters is the relationships, right? The love and all that stuff, all the gooey stuff, right? Yeah. That's the important thing.
Yeah. But see, Monty Python is so ingrained in me, I just can't let it go.
Well, I tell you, I am a softie, and I'll let you know when we get to the Dial of Destiny what parts the Manateers came out in. Yeah. So another quick story. Bob and I are fortunate that we both live close to each other. Unfortunately, Karen's up in the satellite, and we don't see her but every 3 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Bob and I had lunch, and I gave him a hug. Just we don't see each other as often as we used to, and you guys see me at a convention or at a show. I'll be down at Comic-Con in San Diego. Come up and give me a big hug. You can tell me afterwards that you listen to the podcast, but 9 times out of 10, I'll give you a hug or body slam you, depending on how you're coming at me. No, but seriously, good film, just good acting all around.
And everybody rides off into the sunset.
And everybody rides off into the sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. Or so we thought. Because,
it had been so long.
Lucas, yeah.
What year was...
It was 89, right?
Okay.
That was, Last Crusade was 89. So then we go into the future to 2008.
2008.
So 19 years, kids. A lot of people had not even been born when the previous one was out. And then we have, Larry, what's the next one?
Indiana Jones and the
Kingdom
of the
Crystal Skull.
Yes, Larry just blew that.
Or as I like to call it, Indiana Jones in space.
The B movie.
As we get all the aliens and the UFO and
This is the one that Spielberg resisted for a very long time and then eventually gave in.
I like this a lot more now than I did then. And one of the things that I really enjoy is when the soldiers come up and they pull up the guns and he's with his friend and says, "Put your hands down, you're embarrassing me." The other scene that I liked at the time I thought was kind of hokey, but to escape the nuclear blast, the bomb, Indy hides in a refrigerator and survives.
This is where we get nuking the fridge from.
this is where you need Mythbusters.
Never mind, every bone in his body would be broken. Well, this is where we kind of transition because, like in the first film and the other two films, Indy could get hurt, and he frequently did get hurt. He got banged up a lot. He got beat the F up, as the kids say. But starting in Crystal Skull, he could get in a refrigerator and get shot hundreds of yards by a nuclear blast and open the door and walk out. And that's sort of, the last two
that
movies.
thing like bounces and rolls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like,
oh, yeah.
And Dr. Jones, he was working with the military in this film. So did he help defeat the Nazis? And that's why we got into the...
But did you catch the name of the general?
No.
It's General Ross.
Huh.
Really?
That's interesting.
Calls him General Ross. I'm like, here we go. It's going to show up here pretty soon.
Too funny.
In this one, we're introduced to his son. Was that a good idea or a not so good idea?
But touching on General Ross for just 1 second.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought of another connection.
Mm-hmm.
In the new Captain America with Sam Wilson as Captain America, who is going to play General Ross in that movie?
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
That's what I
foretelling.
Interesting.
But going on to his son. I think it's interesting that as they age Indy, or as Harrison Ford ages or whatever, you start out in the 30s, by Crystal Skull, now you're in the 50s. We get to, we'll talk about Dial of Destiny, but that's 70s. So, the decades are changing. You see how Indiana Jones basically relates to different times and generations. And
you make a good point. And I remember going into this film, saw it in Alameda. They have a very nice theater in Alameda. And I went into it thinking I'm visiting an old uncle who I haven't seen for a while, right? Because it had been a number of years since The Last Crusade. And I think what really hurt this is that The Last Crusade was such a good movie and you have such fond memories of that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not that story. And I left without the fond memory of my uncle who I haven't seen in years. And I kind of remembered that he would get drunk, pass out on the couch and fart a lot.
Well, when this came out, when this came out, it's funny to me now to think about this, but I remember I was vehemently opposed to Indiana Jones having anything to do with like UFOs, aliens, anything like that.
I remember that.
And I find it really funny now. I was like, why was I so upset about that? And admittedly, I think I might have seen the movie. I don't know if I even saw the movie like once since I saw it in the theaters. So when I watched it this last week before we did the podcast, it was really mystifying to me why I got so uptight about that. Because it was sort of like, every movie, every film in this series has been around some sort of artifact and there's been some sort of weird thing. And, whether it's science or magic or whatever, it kind of doesn't matter, right? So I look back on that, what was it, 15 years ago, and I'm really like, why did I, go? I went in with a negative attitude when I went to see it, because I was just like, this is wrong, shouldn't be doing it. End of story. I enjoyed it much more this time around. It's overlong. There's a lot of stuff they could probably, it's like starts really well with his, story, and the Russians coming in and something's going on and he's trying to figure out what's happening, and the kid shows up and it's like, oh, that's really good. But it kind of goes Looney Tunes when they get like into the rainforest and all this stuff happening. People are swinging from vines, and it's just like, okay, this is it goes off the rails a little bit for me at that point. But I don't hate it. I don't hate this film. It's just not, if you compared it to the other three, it's still down at the bottom, but there's still pretty good things in there, and I like seeing Karen Allen again.
Oh yeah.
But it's definitely, if they tightened up the final act a little bit, I think it would be much better.
Well, I mean, you have to remember too, that it's still based on the old movie serials. And what happened in old movie serials is like, there'd be a cliffhanger at the end, and then the next episode, you see him going off the cliff in a car, and the next episode they had jumped out just before they hit the cliff, or all these really wild, hair-raising things that happen, and to drag you back to the movie theater the next week. It's the same with Indiana Jones, except we have much more advanced effects and things, so they're able to do much bigger stunts, and but back in the day, it was all big overblown stuff, which is basically Indiana Jones. It's all big overblown stuff put into a non-stop action movie.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you'd watch James Bond or John Wick or whatever, Mission Impossible. They've all got that stuff in them. How the hell does Tom Cruise survive any of those Mission Impossible movies? How the hell does Keanu Reeves get shot 500 times in a John Wick movie and he's still running around fighting?
Yeah.
So, sometimes you just have to throw logic out the window and just, I'm going to enjoy this movie.
You're a better person than I, because that really, the last John Wick movie, I mean, even the last Charlie's Angel movie, I was having trouble with it, because look, if I'm watching like, Shazam or Spider-Man, okay, these are metahumans that are doing, whatever. But if, I don't know, if it's a movie that's kind of grounded in reality, and that's just me,
I'm right with you.
In the first John Wick movie, he fell like 2 stories out of a window, and now he's falling like 15 stories through a glass. I'm like, oh, Anyway, let's not poo-poo on John Wick, but that's good that you can kind of remove yourself from that, Bob.
Well, keep in mind all the movies I grew up with, man. Hong Kong kung fu films and stuff. I mean, that's just all part of the movie.
Yeah.
How many times can you get beat up and still come back at the end to prove that your kung fu is better than their Japanese karate?
Even those kung fu movies, I mean, a Bruce Lee movie as opposed to a movie of, the 7 deadly cranes, you're going to be like, okay. I don't know. Just to me, it's a different kind of movie. And even with the Bourne movie, we should probably do an action adventure podcast. I don't want to take away from Indiana Jones, but anyway, so we all agree the Crystal Skull was pretty good, fun, nice to have our uncle farting on the couch again, and then move the dial. Unless there's any last comments, no one really said anything about Shia. Okay.
What is there to say?
What?
I think that's just kind of another example of not being able to separate actor from his character.
Yeah.
I thought he was fine in the movie. I don't know. I don't
A
know
lot of
much.
people just don't like him as an actor. Now, recently, Debbie and Michael and I were binging our way through the Transformer movies so that we went and saw the new one. And, he's in the first couple. So I'm, it's like, all right, man, whatever. He's
And Wiki.
Wiki. But yeah, I mean, so I don't know. Just seeing him in this, I can accept it. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, whether it's him or Tom Cruise or Mel Gibson or whatever. It's like, whatever,
To me, Shia
in real lives, but as long as they do a good job acting and a likable character, then with that.
like you were saying about Sean Connery, Shia plays Shia. He doesn't really act, to me. You take the character in Holes, the character in the Transformers, the kid in Indiana Jones, it's Shia. He's not acting. And so, he's not a bad kid or anything like that, but he just, I don't know, didn't really add to this story for me.
Well, he's no Ezra Miller.
Got that right. That guy has dimension and depth. Did I say dementia? Dimension. Anyway.
Well, you would really have to separating him from his character to enjoy it. It's almost like trying to watch the old Bill Cosby show.
That's true.
It's kind of going to the extreme. I have not seen The Flash yet, so
I haven't seen it either.
I've seen it 5 times. What? Batman's in it. Probably go see it after the podcast.
Adam West.
Have a good time.
I don't want to spoil anything, but Adam West might be in it.
If you can tell from the really terrible CGI, but that's just
if you
what I
haven't
heard.
seen the movie, they could read that they're farting. Well, anyway, enough with the farts.
So much farts. Something's going on here. I'm glad
We
I'm in
had
the
beans
sound.
for dinner tonight. So on that note, let's kick it over to the Destiny of Dial, or the Dial of Destiny. Sokak and his dyslexic podcast mates will help decipher what. Anyway, what'd you think of the Dial of Destiny, Bob?
I enjoyed it a lot.
Did you go into it thinking he's too old? The franchise is just
like I told you guys, they did a hell of a lot better job in action than Picard did.
Yeah.
And, Patrick Stewart, Harrison Ford, they're roughly the same age, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both around 80.
Yeah.
And, of course, Harrison Ford probably had better stunt people and better makeup and better whatever. But, he did have certain parts where he's like climbing up that rock face and talking about how his back hurts.
You didn't have to drink the blood of Callie.
Hey,
all that. And so he admits he's old, but he's still taking part in all that action and doing what he
in real life too. He's dating Callista Flockhart. He's crashed a plane and walked away from it. He's
Ford.
That's sort of his charm, right? He's sort of a I don't give a shit kind of guy, and that's talk about just being whoever you are as the actor. I always feel like, especially with Indy, I always feel like a lot of 90% of Harrison Ford goes into Indy, he's just like a very no nonsense, take it or leave it kind of guy. And
I absolutely love Mark Hamill's impersonations of Harrison Ford, because it really is the I don't give a shit version.
Right.
I don't know.
He just really doesn't, but even with that, I don't mean that he's not a dedicated performer or artist. I think he really is focused on his work, and he cares about like Indy, I think he really does care about, and he wants to do a good job, but
Oh yeah.
like he's gonna like, this is how I interpret it, this is the way I'm gonna do it, and screw off. But that's
But whether it's a successful movie or a not so successful movie, there are no apologies, and
right.
kind of takes the accolades. It's almost embarrassing to him in some of the interviews that he's had over the years. But he has fun. I mean, you throw Chewbacca jokes at him on talk shows, and he runs with it. And he's one of my favorite actors. All the movies that he's done, I've really enjoyed, except for Cowboys versus Aliens. But that's a whole nother.
But I think that's a big part of his appeal with people, is that there's a genuineness that people appreciate, from him and from the character. And even though, like Indy's very tired, like older and maybe not able to do as much. And I think that could also be part of the divide in the reviews that I've seen, is that maybe some of us who are a little bit older now appreciate that honesty about like, yeah, I'm not able to do as much. And maybe some of the younger folks are kind of like, oh, this is not as appealing.
Look at this old guy.
Yeah. Look, one of my favorite lines, I can't think of the name of the film, and I mentioned this before, with Schwarzenegger, and he's a sheriff and he falls through the roof or something like that. Or, Sheriff, how do you feel? I feel old. I wake up and I'm not like 80, but Jesus, I feel like 80 sometimes. It's like, why is my ear ringing? Why does my hip hurt? Why am I drawing myself with the towel and my back goes up? So this version of Indiana Jones and the way that Harrison Ford portrays Indy at this age, I think you're right, Walker. It's Harrison Ford at this age. And, people and things piss him off. Everyone's talking about the moon landing, and he can give two shits about the moon landing. And,
they even have a scene early in the film where, the Nazis are like leading him off, and then he suddenly, like in his earlier days, he'll punch one and sock the other one and elbow another, and so he goes to sock one, and they just like pull him back and keep on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that doesn't work anymore. But
I do want to say kudos to the de-aging crew, or the deep fake.
That was a really good job, especially if you sit there and compare it to what they did with Peter Cushing. That was like one of the earlier de-aging things, I guess he was another actor made to look like Peter Cushing, but even some of the other de-aging stuff.
Well, Luke and Mandalorian, I thought was fantastic. I mean, we talked about how shitty the CGI was in the what was the Mummy movie with The Rock and the Scorpion King?
Yeah, that's got to be rock bottom.
They've come like a long way. And I will say, making a comparison, de-aging Harrison Ford looked good, but not as good as Gollum in The Lord of the Rings. I mean, that was 100% CGI with Andy Serkis playing the Gollum character, but by God, it was good de-aging in this film. In my humble,
they had to de-age Gollum.
No, they had to create Gollum from. Well, actually, they did.
I can't say. Like I say, I watched Lord of the Rings once through, and wished I had all those hours of my life back.
Oh, well, it's okay.
And those were not the director's cuts either. Those were the movie cuts.
Yeah, that beginning sequence where they're back in 1944. Was really good. It was a little on the dark side. I feel like they do this with a lot of CGI to help hide any issues. But that was a really nice sequence. It was really nice to have young Indy at the beginning there, and he's back and he's with his buddies. We got another sidekick, and we get to see, Indy against Nazis is always fun, right? And I really enjoyed it.
But it wasn't only Indy that they de-aged.
They did
also de-aged Mads Mikkelsen, who played Dr. Miller.
Good point.
Yeah.
You also played?
He was in Rogue One.
In Casino Royale.
Yeah. He's been in a lot of things.
But I loved him in Casino Royale, so I was really glad to see him in this. But they killed him, supposedly killed him off early. And I thought, oh man, what a waste. And then luckily he came back. So
I do wonder why he didn't have at least some sort of scar or something. I mean, the dude gets whacked pretty hard in the head. Probably should have
falls
died.
off a train and into a ravine or whatever. And
yeah, a little surprised that there was no indication of injury.
Pulled a John Wick on us.
We'll suspend our disbelief. I found it amusing that he was sort of a stand-in for Werner von Braun, who I think more and more people are realizing that, yeah, he was a Nazi. My brother is going to hate me saying that, but it's true. He was part of the whole Operation Paperclip when they brought Nazis over to work on our space program. So
rockets.
Yeah, rockets. We need rockets.
Rocket to the moon.
So that was an interesting little take on it.
But I think one part that was kind of most enjoyable for me was when Indy was in peril and suddenly Sala shows up, saves him, runs him over to the cab, and off they go. And I was just, because I went into this movie with, I had no clue what was going to happen in this movie.
Yeah, I was trying
He
to
showed
avoid
up.
it.
It was like, all right, this is very cool. But I was very sad when he told Indy he had his passport. He's ready for adventure. He's ready to go, and then he can't.
Yeah.
Indiana tells him to stay behind. But
yeah, he's got that big family to take care of.
He does.
Yeah, he comes back at the end. But I mean, it would have been fun to see him at least get a little adventure in.
Well, go ahead, Walker.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead, Larry.
It was good enough for me to hear him give him hell, Indiana Jones. So I was like, yeah, oh, soup, sorry. I was the only one clapping in the theater at that point. I just about jumped up. There's a meme of Shatner like clapping hysterically.
Everybody in the theater, get down, I can't see.
But yeah, Sala was good. What do you guys think of Wombat?
Wombat, somebody was talking about her earlier today and saying that they don't want to see her in another movie. But I mean, I agree she was good in this. I don't know if she could carry the series going forward on her own. I just don't think she's that strong a character or that strong an actress. But for what she was in this film, she was good.
Yeah, I would agree with Bob. I know this actress has been in a bunch of things, including Fleabag, which people have recommended to me, but I haven't seen yet. I thought she was fine. I don't see her character as being a leading character in something. I just don't feel like she's necessarily that interesting. I mean, I feel like people are wanting to hand the reins over to somebody. It's like, no, Indiana Jones is Indiana Jones. And can we just let it end? I mean, I think this is an issue that I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I have heard some people say some things that I do think are correct in that, like, Indiana Jones is a character that was created back in the early 80s. And we people of a certain age, like us sitting here, and I'm sure a lot of people watching or listening, we grew up with that character in the 80s. But for like the 20-year-olds or the 15-year-olds, where are their new characters, right? They need brand new franchises, new things, totally unrelated to the stuff we grew up with.
That's where you get Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, I guess that's one thing they have, right? So that kind of stuff. I mean, just let Indiana Jones finally go into the sunset. And we don't need to take any characters from Indiana Jones and try to spin them off. It's done, and that's okay. That being said,
I was reading today that the director, John Wick, was saying he wasn't sure whether or not there would be a John Wick 5. I'm like, how the hell's a John Wick 5? He's dead. He died in 4. He's done. So
It's
why
always-
sit there and you say, I
movie
don't know.
based in reality.
Hey, after what was it? Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the Earth was exploded, but we still got the next Escape from the Planet of the Apes. So if there's money, if they think there's money, they'll find a way to do it. But getting back to Helena, I thought she was okay as a character. I think, it was hard at first to like her because she seemed to be only driven by money, right? She wanted to sell the whatever Antikythera, whatever it is.
Yes.
But then you could see that like she was really a person who was looking for that adult figure in her life, like her dad had been obsessed with this thing and not really there for her. And then Indy, even though he was her godfather, had not really been there for her either. So she was kind of a person who was missing that part of her life, So I think they made her, by the end, certainly she was a much more likable character.
I agree. And I like like I said, they didn't hold back on how old Indiana Jones is. The new villains tried to abduct him and he was going to try to punch him and they just kind of smacked him and put a, cover over his head and threw him in a truck. And, he got his knocks in though. I mean, he could fight, he could still drive, he could still,
he's still smart. That's the thing, right? He was still smart. And Harrison Ford said in some interview that he always viewed Indy as an academic first and an adventurer second,
right?
Which I thought was interesting.
He go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
I was going to say, speaking of that, in this film, if you look at the early films, how he gets from place to place, it's almost an accident. He gets captured and then he winds up somewhere else, or, he does something and it puts him somewhere else. In this movie, this was more how it should have been, where he's following clues and he's taking those clues and going to the next step, and he's leading the way rather than being led by circumstance.
Yeah, unfortunately, the villains are right behind him every time he finds something.
That's the whole idea, going all the way back to the first movie. Belloc was like, whenever Indiana Jones would get something,
you take it away.
Belloc was always right there to take it away. So, that's sort of the Indiana Jones tradition.
Yeah.
The destiny in Indiana Jones.
One of the things that I kept asking is, I can appreciate Wombat and then the little kid in the casino that's helping her little short round, if you will. Where's Indy Jr.? Where's Shia? And, wasn't man tears, but it was a very poignant part where he was explaining that his son died in the war and why, he enlisted to piss me off. And
it's kind of interesting the way they led into that too, because, he's asked, if you went back in time, what would you change? And his answer, without missing a beat, was, I would tell my son not to enlist.
Yeah, because you're going to die.
Yeah.
And it showed that, Indiana Jones had regret. I mean, in the beginning, they covers Marion's picture and there's divorce papers and, the relationship that was meant to be but never could, for various reasons. And I just, that kind of like tugged on the heartstrings for me. What would you do? I'd tell him, don't enlist. But, getting back to him figuring things out, I mean, he knew that when they got the map with the crescent moon and all that, it's heavier than wooden wax. So let's go ahead and melt the wax. And then there's the real map and then all this other kind of stuff. But getting back to what Walker had said earlier, he's climbing, or maybe it was you, Bob, climbing that mountain. I'm like, what are you doing? Thinking, what the hell am I doing climbing this rock? It's just this interesting, because I think when you're of a certain age, like I said, you don't have to be like 80 or pushing 100, but this reminds me of the one time we went geocaching, Walker.
Oh God.
Let's go get the cache, and we took off our shoes and our socks and we walked in this water rocks and
first, we didn't have to take our shoes and socks off to go out to this thing. It was in the estuary, but then the tide came in.
That's right.
Then we were waiting, and it was like, yeah, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
But anyway.
Like in my real life, I do AV installs, and it's like, so I feel like Indiana Jones sometimes. It's like you climb a ladder so many times during the day, and it's like, by the 20th time you're climbing that ladder, it's like, the hell am I doing? It's like I could do that in my younger days, but
yeah.
Get old.
This film also reminded me of Wrath of Khan, which I know we all love, because that is also about getting older. Now, Kirk was, I think, supposed to be turning 50, so not quite.
He was ancient.
Well, yeah, back then I thought he was ancient. Now I'm like, jeepers, he's not that old. But again, that feeling of like, oh my God, I'm getting older. I can't do what I used to do. Am I really that useful anymore? Blah, 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 blah. And seeing that, hey, you still have something to contribute. You're still valuable. You still, and especially at the end, I know I'm kind of skipping here, but, you can kind of see like, Indy's just sort of withdrawn. He's become his most cantankerous self. And and I loved, it was very pragmatic of how Helena got him back. She did it the same way Indy would have, basically knocking him out. But, he's sort of like, she's like, I had to bring you back and you're needed or whatever. And he's like, yeah, by who, right? So he doesn't even realize the value he has to the people around him. He doesn't even think that the people around him care. And then everybody, it was very, even though this wasn't a Spielberg movie, I thought that ending was very Spielbergian, and that everybody shows up. And it was like, oh, okay.
Well, that's kind of my theory on life too. It's like, if you retire and you're like, okay, I'm retired now, I don't have to work. I'm going to sit in this chair all day and watch TV and read the paper or look at social media, whatever. It's like, yeah, those are the ones that decline faster, go downhill faster, die at an age. And it's the ones that, okay, now I'm retired. I'm going to travel. I'm going to pursue this hobby. I'm going to, I'm going to stay active and do things. And
you have to.
Those are the ones that just keep on going.
Right.
True. Very true.
So remember, kids, if you learn anything from this podcast.
Well, I love the ending, and we could talk about finding the other piece to the dial and going through the fissure and back in time, and
it didn't bother me a bit. I know some people thought it was over the top, but it's like, he's found the Holy Grail, the Ark. He's done UFOs. I don't care. It was great. It was a great.
Well, he found the other half of himself.
Very well said.
Very nice.
The dial as a metaphor.
Very well said.
Yeah, very, very nice.
Yeah.
So. And the fact that he wanted to stay there is like, yeah, there's no one left. What is my purpose now? And
but just, you have to ask Indy, how many goddamn time travel films have you seen? You can't stay back here.
Exactly.
He even tells him, you're going to screw everything up if you stay back here.
But I love the way that he wakes up. He's in his bed, he's bandaged up, and he's like, oh. And this is where the man tears popped up.
There were a few woman tears too, I'll tell you.
Glad to hear.
My eyes were as dry as can be.
He's just the hard case. He's still the maintaining.
Wombat brings back Marion. And that scene, that they have, what doesn't hurt? Here. I just lost. I was just like, and then when it ended again, standing ovation, like,
There were people clapping in my audience too. I was surprised.
This was the first time an Indiana Jones movie ended where I was like, please let there be another since Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I did want to see more Indiana Jones after Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I think it's a good way. I hope they end the series here.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good ending, I think.
That's a wrap. Call it good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if I had to rank it, I wouldn't give it. This is not a plus movie for me. There were a few things that kind of dragged on, like the scene with the carts in Morocco or wherever it was, and some other stuff. But I mean, it's at least a solid B for me. I would put it ahead of maybe neck and neck with Temple of Doom, maybe a little above Temple of Doom. But I thought it was a really good movie, and I was shocked how many bad reviews it was getting, because and a lot of the bad reviews were like, oh, it's a depressing downer, it's a this, that. I was like, no, it's a happy movie at the end. He comes back, he reconnects with people, he realizes, that he still has a life. And
maybe it's because I don't pay attention to critics anymore, but I didn't really see too much negativity. People on the internet talking about the film, people who had not seen it they would be making fun of people who liked it, or making fun of the movie just based on it being an old guy in a movie kind of thing. But everyone who's seen it on the internet seemed to all really like it.
Well, I avoided the reviews and everything. I didn't read anything before I saw it. I looked at stuff afterwards. And yeah, it's a lot of the people who are the so-called professional critics are all dumping on it, but a lot of the just regular folks seem to really enjoy it.
They're comparing it to the failure of The Flash. The Flash was not a failure. If you haven't seen the film, don't make any comments on it.
Well, that was the whole story this morning when I was looking at social media, was the fact that Indiana Jones is crashing hard at the box office. And unfortunately, it's like people start making box office predictions before the movies even come out. And it's like, well, how do you know how bad or good this thing's going to do at the box office? Because some stuff, it'll start slow and then there's word of mouth and then it grows, and then it actually does well. Other things just, they start off big the first weekend or two and then just slide right off the cliff. So, well, and they cost so damn much.
I was just going to say, its budget is going to hurt it, because it's almost $300 million budget on this thing.
Like Star Wars was what, like 7 or 8 million, right?
The original Raiders was just under $20 million.
Now, even if you take, the dollar and inflation, whatever, I mean, it's still not going to equal a $300 million movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there weren't as many theaters back then, and gas was 25 cents, and we can.
But and you could see it for like 70 cents.
Yeah, well, and popcorn was only $1. But what I think is going to happen is, just with all the films that we watch, the Indiana Jones films, 5-10 years, this is going to be a lot. I think this is going to age very well. And look, if you're of a certain age, or you're more of a gamer than a movie person, and this didn't, interest you, or, maybe, I think what hurts these later films is that they're 5, 10, 15 years after the last one. And maybe Indiana Jones is out there in the internet and there are memes, but without having that investment in the character, you're going to come into it kind of like,
Well, then too, what hurts a lot of movies now is the people that say, well, I'll wait till it comes out on streaming.
Right.
Yeah, there's that too.
Because
I'll wait until I can watch it in my living room.
Right. Disney will probably turn this around in less than 3 months and put it on streaming, the way they've been doing most of the films. So,
and there's another aspect, the merchandising. I mean, there's Indiana Jones underwear, there's tiki mugs now, Indiana Jones tiki mugs, Indiana Jones. they're going to make a ton of money on the merchandising, and they're going to continue to merchandise the hell out of that character. I mean,
Yeah, but there's also like overseas box office.
Yeah,
like Pacific Rim, it bombed here, but it did huge in China, which made it worth making a sequel.
Yeah.
But and a lot of films, it's like, why did that film get a sequel? It was a bomb. But well, no, it did really well in Europe, or it did really well in Asia, or somewhere else that it made a bunch of money. So,
well, I will say that if you listen to this and you hadn't seen the movie, I feel sorry because we spoiled the heck out of it for you.
Well, that's sort of the tradition. If you're going to come in this thing having not seen a movie and expect not to be spoiled, well,
yeah, but if you haven't seen it, go see it. You're going to have a good time.
You'll still enjoy it, even though you know everything that's going to happen.
Too. The Flash is a good movie. Don't let me tell you it's not.
Yeah, although I might wait until it comes to streaming.
It's okay. I never watched Pacific Rim Part 2, so we're good. Any last thoughts about the Dial of Destiny or Indiana Jones in general, my friends?
I think after this last binge, I may revisit those movies more often in the future.
There you go. That's a good compliment, actually.
It's the classic American hero and maybe a dying breed, the rugged individualist.
Indeed.
Yeah, enjoyed the films a lot.
Indeed. And again, I like how they let him age, and he couldn't do all the things that he did, and he had to think more rather than punch more in this one, which was good. And again, thanks
he
to
could probably
John
beat up Picard in a fight.
What's that?
You could probably beat up Picard in a fight.
Well, if they both didn't get out of breath before crossing the ring, but yeah.
Who would win in a poker game?
Or chess?
Or
Indiana Jones was the chess dude. So
who could blow out the 80 candles on a cake? I don't know. Picard has the android lungs now, so he probably.
Oh, let's not go there. Yeah, next they'll make Indy an android, and then What else do we have to do, Larry?
Well, next is our sensor sweep.
Oh boy.
Do we have things to share?
Oh, you bet we do.
All right. Well, let's let Bob kick it off.
Okay. I was putting posters and postcards out for our shows coming up.
I was too.
Plug. And of course, I'd hit certain comic shops and certain things would fly off the shelves at me. So I was at one, and Diamond put out a Legends series of busts. They make like 1,000 busts or whatever.
Bob likes a good bust.
Yeah, I'm a bust man. So first one I found at one of the comic shops, and there's no way I could turn down a bust of the Iron Giant.
Oh, nice.
Very cool.
Yes.
Even has Hogarth on his shoulder.
Very cool.
I got, and these are the limited to, I can't remember. I got postcards inside that say it's like, number one, whatever of 1,000, but it doesn't matter to me. It's still, number 892 looks just as good as number one, right? So once it's out of the box and packaging and it's up on the shelf, well, it looks great. So I got that one. I thought, okay, that's cool. And then I was at another comic shop putting out more postcards and posters, and the same series of Diamond Legends busts. Yet this one had, I'm going to just pretend like he's coming out of the ocean here, Godzilla.
Dun, 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 dun,
So,
dun.
if you know me, you obviously know I ain't gonna pass up a Godzilla. So I got an Iron Giant bust and a Godzilla bust, and I was a happy.
Let them fight.
Them fight. So other than that, personal life, I was up at the Poulter Mansion a few days ago, shooting an episode of Creature Features. So that will be on air, courtesy of their app and YouTube and Vimeo and all those places on July 22nd. And that was like, we actually had to do some time travel because July 22nd is the Saturday of our Ultraman show. So I couldn't sit there and go, yeah, we've got this Ultraman show coming up. We just made up this whole thing where, I'm sorry if I'm ruining an illusion here, but kind of made up a whole thing where it's like, I left the show, I came up there to shoot that. I'm going back there the next day. So everybody go to bed early, get your sleep and come out to the show tomorrow kind of thing. So that was fun. And then a couple days from now, I'm going to be recording an episode of Kaiju Transmissions. Go on with those guys and talk about the shows. And probably next month will be Collect All Monsters. But so trying to just plug the shows and get things going. And of course, go to BayAreaFilmEvents.com and you can look all these shows up that we're talking about. But I won't bore you once again with all the details, but we'll see.
They're on the site.
Yeah, excellent. And Walker.
Well, this is something that I think I got back at the end of May. Oh, of course, it's falling over now. And had up on
May
my
4th?
Had on my Twitter.
Ooh.
This is my Luke Skywalker from The Mandalorian Hot Toys figure, which I waited nearly 2 years for and was really starting to sweat it and wondering when it was going to come in. So very pleased to get this 12-inch figure. He has a little baby Yoda that he's holding. And I sort of had decided to stop getting any hot toys a few years ago, but when I saw him on The Mandalorian and then they advertised that, I was like, oh, I can't, must have.
The temptation is too great.
Yeah, it was too strong. So that's about the only actually large purchase, fan type purchase I've made in the last few years. But it's a very nice figure. So.
Oh, I tell you, Kevin D'Antonio has a box waiting for me at his house that it's something special. I should have it maybe by the next podcast. I'll share it.
Nice.
How about you, Larry?
Well, I wanted to, before I get into the stuff, I've been watching Secret Invasion. I don't know if you guys are watching that.
Script Invasion?
Secret.
Oh.
Yes, we have.
I saw it. I fell asleep in the second episode, so I haven't seen all of it.
It's doubtful we'll have that coming up on Planet 8.
I'm enjoying it so far.
I am too, surprisingly. So we'll see where it goes. They're making some interesting choices. This is one of the last comic series that I read before I got out of comics. So we'll see how this goes. I'm also watching Strange New Worlds, and it's a real roller coaster ride for me.
Yeah.
The first episode
it was bad.
The second episode was a little bit better for me and fun to watch. And then this third episode of the second season, there's pieces of it I like, but overall I'm wondering, is this even Star Trek? This was like the American Godzilla movie with Matthew Broderick. You didn't have to call it Godzilla. You could have called it Beast of 50,000 fathoms or whatever. It didn't have to be called Godzilla. They don't have to call these episodes Star Trek. And maybe I'm just such an old fogey. I spend a large portion of my day trying to figure out the eugenic wars, and you know, it was originally in the 90s and now it's in the 20s, but then, you know, the Enterprise had never heard of Khan, but now there's a Khan serving on the Enterprise.
And everybody's heard of him.
Yeah, it really doesn't make a lot of sense.
I'm not the Star Trek purist that you guys are, so I can kind of enjoy it for what it is.
Well, that's good. I mean,
Spock is like crying every 5 minutes, and
oh, I know.
yeah, it's just, there's a lot of stuff that.
Well, I'll tell you, if you want to binge something fun, there's a couple things I've been binging that both on Netflix. One was the Skull Island cartoon, which is surprisingly pretty good.
Okay, I'll have to check that out.
And then I just started watching about 3 or 4 episodes into the 12 that's up, but is the 3rd season of the animated Ultraman, which this 3rd season is really good so far. So I would recommend both of those.
Okay.
If you're into your cartoons.
Check that out. I do want to have a shout out in the vernacular of today's youth. Doc Strange on Twitter. Bless you, brother. Sent, for those of you watching the podcast, nice. You can see it's called a book called Heroes of Horror. For those of you not watching the podcast on YouTube, you should. He also sent me a back issue of The Savage Sword of Conan. And again, the cover art is being shown on YouTube. On the audio, you just have to take my word for it. Also, 1941, The Shadow. He sent me a ton of comic books as well.
I don't know.
Billy's a very nice guy.
He is
on his show several times.
Yeah, so if you're on Twitter, seek out Doc Strange. He's so cool. Purchases have been kind of on the smaller side. Disaster movies, soundtrack collection, The Poseidon Adventure, The Towering Inferno, and Earthquake. These are limited releases from La La Land Records. So if you go to La La Land, I don't know if they still have these on there, but this was limited to 5,000 copies. It has soundtrack for all 3 movies. For those of you on YouTube, here's the front cover, back cover. It's just basically movie posters, and the CDs are in this wonderful little box set. There's also a 3 CD release of Bram Stoker's Dracula, and this is the music composed by, I'm going to butcher this, Wojciech Pilar. And again, La La Land Records. This was a limited edition of 3,000 units. And this past Father's Day, my father, God rest his soul, was a huge fan of Popeye Doyle and the French Connection films. And by golly, La La Land, again, those of you on YouTube, there's the CD released, the French Collection soundtrack for the first film, the second film. And Bob and Karen, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there was a Popeye Doyle TV series in the 80s. And it was, Ed O'Neill, Al Bundy himself played Popeye Doyle.
Wow.
A version of Popeye Doyle. If you guys go to YouTube and just type in Ed O'Neill, Popeye Doyle, it'll show you some video clips. And it is something that you just need to watch in your life.
Here's something we didn't touch on, and this brings us back full circle.
Yes.
Wasn't there, I'm remembering it, but I didn't have time to go down the rabbit hole. Young Indiana Jones.
Yeah, 1992.
Oh, yes.
Which we didn't touch on, and I didn't want to touch on just because I have just vague recollections of it even existing. But yeah, wasn't that his? Was that his son, or was that?
It was Indy.
Oh, okay, when he was a kid.
And in one episode, Harrison Ford did do a guest spot where they were kind of jumping in time from the teenage Indy to the middle-aged Indy, and like you, Bob, I vaguely remember. I didn't watch every single episode religiously, but that does exist as well. So, hello, Cadet Campbell. We've
Cadet
missed you.
Campbell, he was crying at me for the last 5 minutes, so I decided to pick
For
him
those
up.
of you on YouTube, you're going to see this cutie patootie. Those of you on the audio podcast may or may not hear him. Well, and so that's all the stuff that I have. You guys, this was an enjoyable podcast as always. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Campbell.
Always a pleasure, sir.
Yes,
Everyone out there listening, keep downloading the podcast on Podbean. Keep subscribing on YouTube and commenting on all the social media platforms. Share the podcast with your friends. Check out the Bay Area film events. Yours truly will be at Comic-Con in a few weeks. We'll try to get we will get our July 22nd podcast recorded before I head out there.
Oh, yes.
What's that?
Oh, yes, we will.
Oh, darn tootin'. If you're at Comic-Con,
maybe we'll do a remote from Comic-Con. Karen and I'll crash the party.
Hey, that sounds good to me. If you're at Comic-Con, message me on social media. I'd love to say hello, and I'll have some backpacks with me. I'll be passing out for Planet 8 and some stickers and magnets and all kinds of good stuff. So this brings this podcast to a close. We thank you all very much for tuning in. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Peace out.
Bye.
On that note, this will conclude this transmission from Planet 8. We would like to thank all of our intergalactic audience for listening. Be sure to head on over to our website at www.planet8podcast.com, where you can get more information on this episode's topic.
For more conversation, find us on Twitter at Planet8Cast.
Or on Facebook at facebook.com/Planet8Podcast.
We want to thank you guys for tuning in each and every episode. We look forward to your input and opinions. Until next time, this is Planet 8 signing off. End transmission.
By George, he's got it. It is the end.